He doesn't realize it at first. Not immediately. The mind resists what the heart cannot yet name. At first, it feels like silence. An ordinary pause. A gap he assumes will close on its own, the way it always did before. He tells himself you are just busy, just tired, just taking space. He believes this because, until now, emotional access to you was permanent, reliable, almost invisible, like air. But something has shifted. Your energy is no longer reaching toward him. No explanations, no emotional softening, no quiet attempts to repair what he didn't notice breaking. And this is where his psyche begins to fracture. In Jung's view, the psyche panics most when a familiar source of validation disappears without drama, not through conflict, but through withdrawal. As Carl Jung suggested, the unconscious reacts before the conscious mind catches up, and his unconscious has already noticed. The mirror he used to see himself in is gone. At first, he feels irritation, then confusion, then an unnamed restlessness he can't soothe. Because emotional access is not just affection, it is regulation. And you were regulating him without him ever realizing it. Your presence absorbed his doubts. Your patience diluted his inconsistencies. Your emotional availability made his distance survivable for him. Now, without that access, his internal noise grows louder. He replays conversations, not to understand you, but to locate himself. Where did the certainty go? Why does the space feel heavier than any argument ever did? Why does your silence feel deliberate, even though you never announced it? This is the first crack. He realizes you didn't leave loudly because you didn't need to. Jung wrote that what we take for granted becomes part of the shadow, unseen, unappreciated, but psychologically essential. And you live there for him. Quietly, faithfully, invisibly, until you didn't. And when emotional access is gone, something terrifying happens in his mind. He is left alone with himself, without your warmth to soften the truth. This is only the beginning. At first, he tries to regain control the only way he knows how, by minimizing what he feels. He tells himself, she'll come back. Because in his inner world, you always did. But something in his body doesn't agree. His nervous system is alert now, restless, scanning, uneasy. Jung would say this is the moment when the ego loses its familiar ground. When a man mistakes emotional access for permanence, he builds his sense of control on someone else's presence. And when that presence withdraws without warning, the illusion collapses. He checks his phone more often, not to reach out, not yet, but to reassure himself that the door is still open. And when he notices that you are no longer emotionally available in the same way, no probing questions, no gentle concern, no invisible emotional labor, the panic deepens. Because now he understands something on a level he never allowed himself to see before. You were not just there. You were holding space. And space, once gone, cannot be demanded back. This is when his thoughts become circular. He starts reconstructing moments he once dismissed. Your silence after certain comments. The pauses he never filled. The patience he assumed was endless. What he once interpreted as stability now feels like something far more fragile and far more valuable. In Jung's view, when a man loses access to the anima, the feminine principle that connects him to meaning, warmth, and emotional depth, he does not feel sadness first. He feels disorientation, irritation, a loss of inner balance. That's what this is. Not heartbreak. Not yet. It's the shock of no longer being emotionally central in your inner world. And what terrifies him most is not that you left, but that you did it without trying to convince him to stay. Because persuasion would have meant dependence, and your silence means sovereignty. At this stage, he still believes he can return to the old dynamic. He tells himself you're just testing him, just needing reassurance, just waiting for him to notice. But deep down, something already knows. This time, the door didn't close in anger. It closed in clarity, and clarity cannot be undone. There comes a quieter moment, more dangerous than panic, when he tries to reach for you emotionally and feels nothing. Not rejection, not anger, just absence. And this is when his mind finally begins to register the truth. You are no longer available to be accessed. Your replies, if they exist at all, carry no emotional hooks. Your tone no longer bends toward him. Your presence no longer softens his uncertainty, and something inside him tightens. Because emotional access was never about words. It was about permission. Permission to be inconsistent. Permission to retreat and return. Permission to delay, to hesitate, to offer fragments instead of presence. And that permission is gone. Jung spoke about the moment when the psyche confronts loss not as abandonment, but as individuation. When the other person stops functioning as an emotional extension and becomes sovereign. That is what destabilizes him now. He starts asking questions he avoided before. Why does her silence feel final? Why doesn't she explain herself? Why doesn't she need closure from me? And the most unsettling one of all, why does it feel like she already grieved me while I was still here? This is when regret enters, not loud, not dramatic, but sharp and delayed. He realizes he never lost you in one moment. He lost you slowly. In every time he assumed your emotional availability was infinite. In every pause he didn't fill. In every effort he postponed because you made it easy not to try. And now the access is gone, not because you hardened, but because you outgrew the dynamic. This realization wounds his ego deeply, because he can't fix this with intensity. He can't negotiate with logic. He can't argue with clarity. Your withdrawal wasn't emotional. It was existential. You didn't leave him. You left the version of yourself that made staying possible. And that's when he understands something irreversible. You are no longer emotionally reachable, not because you closed your heart, but because you finally chose to stand inside it. And for the first time, he feels what it's like to be on the outside of a woman's inner world, looking in, without a key. This is where it turns inward. He stops wondering what you're doing and starts questioning who he was while you were there. Not in a productive way. Not yet. It shows up as discomfort, a strange self-awareness he doesn't know how to metabolize. He notices how quiet things feel now. How his distractions don't work the same way. How the absence of your emotional presence leaves gaps he can't fill with logic, work, or stimulation. Because you weren't just a person in his life. You were a regulating force. You absorbed his uncertainty without asking for repayment. You stayed emotionally available while he stayed emotionally undecided. You carried connection while he carried distance. And now, there is no one buffering the consequences. Jung spoke about how the psyche resists responsibility until it has no external container left. This is that moment. The mirror is gone, and there's nowhere left to project. He begins to feel regret, but not the cinematic kind. Not tears, not confessions. It's quieter, more corrosive. It's the realization that the comfort he thought was natural was actually earned, maintained, protected by you. He starts remembering moments differently now. Things he once dismissed as small, your pauses, your subtle withdrawals, your tired patience, take on new weight. He realizes those weren't moods. They were warnings. And the most unsettling thought creeps in slowly. She didn't leave suddenly. She left when she stopped believing change would come. That's when guilt appears, not for hurting you, but for misjudging your limit. Because your strength wasn't loud. Your boundary wasn't dramatic. And he confused your emotional maturity for tolerance. Now, without access to you, his mind tries to reverse time, not to relive love, but to escape consequence. He wonders what would have happened if he had acted sooner, spoken differently, shown up without being asked. But the psyche knows something the ego resists. Timing is not a detail. It's everything. And the door didn't close because he failed once. It closed because he waited too long to become who you needed. This is when the loss becomes real. Not because you're gone, but because you're no longer reachable in the way that once made his indecision safe. And for the first time, he understands. What he lost wasn't a woman. It was access to a version of himself that only existed when you were still willing to stay. This is the phase where he reaches out, carefully, indirectly, almost cautiously. Not because he suddenly understands everything, but because the absence has become unbearable. He sends something neutral, a memory, a question that pretends to be casual, a signal designed to test whether emotional access can still be restored without accountability. And this is where something inside him breaks. Because your response, if it comes at all, doesn't open. It doesn't invite. It doesn't lean. It stands. You are polite. calm, distant without hostility. And that terrifies him more than anger ever could, because anger would mean emotion is still flowing. Your composure means the bond has already reorganized itself without him. Jung believed that the psyche suffers most not from loss, but from the realization that transformation occurred elsewhere, that the other person evolved while we remained psychologically stationary. That is what he feels now. He senses that you are no longer responding from attachment, but from alignment, from a place where your emotional center no longer orbits him. And suddenly, every move he makes feels late, too careful, too weak, too shallow. He notices that he can no longer provoke reaction, no longer pull reassurance, no longer trigger the emotional intimacy that once followed even his smallest gestures. And that's when panic turns into grief. Not grief for the relationship, but grief for the illusion that he could return unchanged and still be welcomed. He begins to understand something devastating. You didn't close the door to punish him. You closed it because reopening it would cost you yourself. And that makes his usual strategies useless. Because desire doesn't move you anymore. Nostalgia doesn't soften you. And confusion doesn't pull you back. You are no longer responding to who he could be. You are responding to who he is. Jung would call this the moment the shadow confronts reality, when excuses collapse and responsibility stands naked. And responsibility is something he avoided for as long as your emotional availability made avoidance painless. Now, without access to you, he finally feels the weight of his own choices. And it lands with one irreversible realization. You didn't become distant. You became complete. And no one who has already crossed that threshold can be reached by the same version of him that once took you for granted. There is a moment, quiet, unspoken, when he stops reaching out, not because he is healed, but because something inside him finally understands. The door is not closed out of bitterness. It is closed out of finality, and that distinction changes everything. He notices that even in his imagination, you no longer respond the way you used to. You don't soften. You don't negotiate. You don't lean toward the version of him that once survived on your emotional generosity. Your absence has structure now. It has weight. It has meaning. This is where acceptance begins. Not peaceful acceptance, but existential resignation. He understands that emotional access is not something you ask for. It's something you are invited into, and the invitation has expired. Jung spoke about the pain of individuation, the moment when the psyche realizes it must stand alone without borrowing identity from another. This is that pain, because without you, he can no longer outsource emotional depth. He must either develop it or live without it. And that realization frightens him more than loneliness. He understands now why your silence feels different from everyone else's. It's not passive, it's complete. You didn't disappear to be missed. You disappeared to return to yourself. And that's when the truth settles in fully. He didn't lose you when you left. He lost you when he stopped being someone you could reach from your center. That understanding lingers, long after desire fades, long after distraction returns. Because some losses don't ache loudly. They reshape a man quietly. And this one will follow him, not as longing, but as a standard he now knows he failed to meet. This is the moment he realizes. Emotional access is not love's guarantee. It is love's privilege. Something subtle begins to happen inside him now. Not longing, not obsession, but recalibration. He starts noticing women differently, not because he wants them, but because something feels missing. Conversations feel flatter. Connections feel thinner. Emotional exchanges don't land the way they used to. And for the first time, he understands something he never articulated before. What he lost was not just you. He lost depth. You were the one who brought emotional dimension into his world without demanding it in return. You asked questions that made him think. You held silence that made him feel. You reflected parts of him he didn't want to face and softened them with presence. Now, without you, his inner world feels louder and emptier at the same time. Jung wrote that when a man loses connection to the feminine principle within himself, life becomes functional but hollow. That's exactly what begins to settle in now. He can perform, he can distract, he can move forward, but he cannot replace what was integrated through you. And that's when the loss becomes permanent. Not because he will never love again, but because he now knows what real emotional access feels like, and he knows he didn't protect it. This knowledge follows him quietly, in moments of stillness, in relationships that almost work, in conversations where something essential never quite arrives. He doesn't always think of you consciously, but he measures unconsciously, and that is the final consequence. Because when a woman leaves from clarity instead of chaos, she doesn't haunt a man's heart. She reshapes his standards. He understands now that emotional access is not something a woman owes. It's something she offers when she feels safe, seen, and met. And the version of him who had that access no longer exists. Not because you took it away, but because you refused to stay small enough to preserve it. This is the quiet aftermath, where nothing explodes, nothing collapses, but everything inside him knows. What he lost was real, and it will never return in the same form. This is the phase that humbles him. Not publicly, not dramatically, but internally, in a way no one else sees. He finally understands something that dismantles every remaining illusion. You didn't withdraw to trigger pursuit. You didn't leave to teach him a lesson. You didn't disappear hoping he would finally choose you. You left because you were done negotiating your worth. And that realization cuts deeper than rejection ever could. Because rejection still centers him. Your clarity does not. Jung believed that the deepest wounds are not caused by loss, but by insight that arrives too late. Insight that reveals who we were when it mattered, and who we failed to become in time. That insight lives in him now. He sees that your silence wasn't passive. It was resolved. You didn't need him to understand. You didn't need closure. You didn't need acknowledgement. And that is what removes his power completely. Because if you had needed something from him, he could have responded, adjusted, performed, returned as a slightly improved version of himself. But you didn't. You reorganized your inner world without including him. And that's when it finally lands. He wasn't abandoned. He was outgrown. This changes how he remembers you. Not as someone he lost, but as someone who reached a level of self-respect he hadn't yet earned access to. Your absence no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like a line he can't cross. And for the first time, he stops asking how to get you back, and starts asking something far more uncomfortable. Who would I have to become to never lose someone like her again? That question doesn't always lead to growth. Sometimes it leads to avoidance, sometimes to repetition. But the question itself never disappears. Because a woman who leaves without resentment leaves behind something far more permanent than heartbreak. She leaves behind awareness. And awareness is irreversible. This is where something quietly collapses. Not the longing, the fantasy. For a long time, the memory of you functioned as a refuge. A place he could revisit when things felt empty. A reminder that he was once chosen, once significant, once emotionally central to someone real. But now even the memory stops offering comfort. Because it has changed. He no longer remembers you as someone who almost stayed. He remembers you as someone who knew when to leave. And that distinction matters. Jung spoke about how memory evolves as consciousness evolves. How we don't remember the past as it was, but as we are now capable of seeing it. And now, with distance, clarity rewrites everything. He notices things he once edited out. Your emotional consistency. Your patience that was never passive. Your strength that never demanded applause. And most painfully, how little you asked for compared to how much you gave. This is when shame enters. Not the dramatic kind, but the quiet recognition of imbalance. The understanding that the relationship didn't fail because love was missing, but because responsibility was deferred. He sees that you didn't leave because you stopped feeling. You left because you started seeing. And suddenly, the narrative he once used to protect himself. She was too sensitive. She wanted too much. It just wasn't the right time. No longer holds. Because the truth has weight now. The truth is that emotional access was offered freely and valued too late. This realization doesn't destroy him. It matures him or exposes where maturity never arrived. And this is when he understands something final. Some women don't leave scars. They leave standards. And once a man has loved and lost, a woman who knew when to walk away without bitterness, without chaos, without spectacle, he never forgets her. Not because he wants her back, but because she permanently raised the bar for what real connection feels like. Only one part remains now, the final shift. This is the final realization, not the loud kind, not the cinematic kind, the kind that settles slowly and stays. He understands now that losing you wasn't cruelty. It was consequence. That if you had stayed, something essential in you would have disappeared. And on some level, deeper than ego, deeper than desire, he knows this. Jung believed that certain losses are initiatory, that the psyche does not mature through comfort, but through encounters with truth it can no longer avoid. You were that encounter. You didn't leave to punish him. You left because staying would have betrayed yourself. And that truth becomes strangely grounding. He sees now that emotional access is not guaranteed by time, attraction, or history. It is sustained by presence, by responsibility, by meeting someone where they are, not where they patiently wait. And he didn't meet you. This understanding doesn't necessarily bring reunion. It brings reckoning. He carries you forward, not as longing, but as reference. As the moment his unconscious learned what happens when depth is mishandled. When a woman chooses herself without rage, without ultimatum, without collapse. That kind of departure rewrites a man. Quietly, irreversibly, and somewhere inside him, a line is drawn. He may love again. He may try again. But he will never again believe that emotional access is infinite. Because now he knows. When a woman leaves with clarity, she doesn't just exit a relationship. She completes a cycle. And the man she leaves behind is never quite the same. Not broken, not destroyed, but awake to what he lost, to why it was lost, and to the cost of realizing it. Only after the door closed for good.